And we are going. What is going on with everybody? It is your boy, Eric, aka Young God, coming to you live in the Green Dungeon, giving it to you real raw rugged. And hey, it's maybe the first time in history out of 300 interviews, somebody else is also reporting from a green dungeon, it looks like. It kind of
Right.
looks like it. Kind of, and
I've
half.
slightly less than green, but yeah, absolutely, definitely a dungeon for sure.
Well, hey, man, can you please introduce yourself to the people out there?
Absolutely, yeah. My name is Chris Houghton, and I'm an artist, voice actor, animation producer, and I play music on the side, and sometimes for work. Ah, I
Hey,
know.
I have a lot of music questions for you.
Sure.
I did peep that. I did see that you had some music stuff going on. I definitely got
Right.
some
Yeah.
music stuff. But before we get into that, how are you doing today, man?
Doing good. Doing good. Tuesday, these days, I'm still working from home, like a lot of folks. So what's odd is like the weekends and the weeks are very similar as far as my experience goes. I'm just in my house for both of those. But during the week, I'm very much in this green room on Zoom all day. So it was actually no problem spending a little time with you this morning, young God.
Hey, man, like probably 10 minutes ago, I was throwing something away and I literally thought, is today Thursday? I said, no, today's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Everything is like, since the pandemic happened, and I feel like more people are spending a little bit more time in their house. The days do seem like they're running together. It's like a long run-on sentence at this point. I'm glad to know I'm not the only person
Oh
that feels.
yeah. Yeah, it's super weird. And I think it's just like, throughout all this, and maybe it's like a beating a dead horse at this point. We're all 2 years into this, but it's like when, I don't know, when you go to work or go to a party or go to a store, there's like a physical change that happens. You're like leaving your space, going to a different space, and you kind of, I don't know, operate within that space. So to have it all just like happen at your house and it just depends on like what Zoom room are you going into. It's a really just weird thing. So like for instance, I'm talking to you and then soon enough I'll jump into a Zoom room that maybe work related, and then after work, it's like I've gotten used to talking to friends who are far away and we'll talk on Zoom. So it's just like uh, the amount of Zoom in my life right now is a little higher than I would want, but that's not to say I'm not excited about this Zoom right now.
No,
This is the only Zoom that matters.
I'm very appreciative of the Zoom call and just listen to you talk. I do think that we are. I don't know if this is going to be as widespread as people think it is. Maybe it will be, but I do think we're one step closer to like the whole metaverse, putting on like the goggles and we're like living in the metaverse. Because I mean,
Yeah.
in actuality, like I found this out a couple years ago and it just threw me off that I guess America is the third most depressed country in the world. And I just would have never guessed that. And just putting that into the fact that people probably depressed with their lives, stressed out with their lives, probably going to go into a virtual reality where they can unplug from real life. And I feel like being in the Zoom, it's not like that, but you are virtually speaking to people. So I do think that,
Yeah.
we're a step away from, eating burgers with cricket green in the metaverse.
Please let that become a reality. No, yeah, I know what you mean. And it's weird. I think like something, I've noticed, especially like at work, I think a lot of folks I work with probably agree. It's like Zoom kind of almost puts the blinders on a lot of things. So, like for instance, if you're meeting up with a bunch of people, only one person can talk at a time. Only one person has the talking stick, and everyone else has to be quiet, or else the crosstalk like doesn't work. And I think just that alone is devastating to conversation
Mm.
because there's a lot of like ebb and flow that happens in person and a lot of like reading of each other's little signals we're all giving out, and I don't know, body language and everything. And to remove all of that and just to have like one person have the microphone at any given time, it it's fine. It's practical. You can get work done, but I think you're missing a layer of like uh honestly like humanity. because you bring up depression, and I think you know there's a lack of connection. I
Mm.
think with that kind of with with this COVID life we've all been living, and so yeah, I don't know about you. For me, it's just made me more aware of that, and like so now I'll try to like seek connection outside of work, or try to balance my life in certain ways, because I'm realizing uh, oh, there's certain things, like for instance my job used to provide me with that it no longer does, certain social needs, and so it's like, okay, I have to get those elsewhere.
It's interesting because, like, I guess going back to the humanity part of the conversation, that's something that's really interesting to me because this past weekend I was at my friend's studio where he was interviewing this girl, and it was a pretty good interview. But at the very start, it was a little not awkward. It was just when you meet somebody for the first time, it's not going to be like probably the most just like just blistering conversation of all time. So I remember he told the co-host, he was like, yeah, probably like delete the beginning part and just start to like where it really gets good. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I think that is interesting to see people kind of build that type of chemistry within the interview or within a conversation, because I feel like that just shows like, oh, this is really human. Like you're seeing the conversation build, you're seeing the relationship build, and I just feel like that's a really human thing. So I agree with you. I do think there's an aspect of life that you do miss that humanity. Even interviews, like I watch a lot of interviews where it's not, I don't know, like when you emailed me, you said you liked it because it felt more conversational. I think those are some of the best interviews when there are conversations going back and forth. And when I don't see that in interviews, sometimes it could work like in a 60 minutes aspect or whatever, where it doesn't need to be that conversational. But in other aspects, I do think some interviews should be conversational. And, I think that's the human part that get,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, man, it was interesting. I was watching some of your interviews, and there's a couple of folks like you'd interview, and this is par for the course, but it's like I could tell they were uncomfortable. Just maybe they hadn't done interviews a lot. I was really uncomfortable when I started first doing interviews, and but maybe they have kind of a persona they need to keep up, if they're a performer of some sort. And it was interesting to watch you kind of navigate that, and so I was really impressed with how you kind of were able to meet people at a level they were at, make them feel comfortable, and kind of soften things so that there could be a really good conversation.
That's my favorite thing. Like when I read or when I'm about to interview somebody and either somebody tells me or I look at another interview and I pick up on like, oh, this person probably awkward or they don't really like doing interviews. It's almost like a challenge for me because I'm like a naturally competitive person. So it's like I'm competing almost like, okay, I'm gonna make this person just feel so comfortable and talk. So that's like a thing that I love to do. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you I'm glad you kind of noticed that. Like in some interviews,
Yeah,
they may be feeling uncomfortable with it. Like my job is to make them feel as comfortable as possible.
totally. I know what you mean about that kind of competitiveness. Like uh actually my first job in the animation industry, I worked at Nickelodeon, and I worked for a director who was really great. He was really talented, and had this intense work ethic, and took a chance on me and helped train me and everything. But man, like lunch would come around, I'd be like, "Hey, you want to grab lunch?" And he would be like, "No, no." And I'd be like, "Come on, you got to eat, right?" And he'd be like, "I'm going to go to the gym."
Mm.
And I'd be like, "Well, how about after that? We could grab lunch." And he'd be like, I swear to God, he told me this once. He was like, "I eat at the gym." And I was like, "No, you." He was like, "I eat at the gym. I eat on the elliptical." I didn't know if he was messing with me or not, but it was like I made it my goal to like. I was like, I want to crack this guy. I want to like. He seems like a fine guy underneath. Like he's talented. We've got a lot to talk about, but there's something blocking, whatever connection there could be. Anyway, I kept asking him, and hopefully, I don't know if I was pestering him. Maybe I was, but eventually he said yes. We had lunch, and it was like totally fine. And uh, I think a lot of people just have like fear around the, like, and a coping mechanism might be like kind of defensiveness, or kind of cold, or kind of jerky. But generally, I think those people underneath are like a little just nervous to connect, or they're not sure how, or maybe they were hurt in the past and damn it, that's not going to happen to me again.
No, I agree. I feel like that is like I would be that person trying to like, oh, let's do this. And I feel like that's half of me with the competitive side, and it's also me. I like study sociology, and I'm very interested on why people do the things they do or why people are the way they are. So if he is like, I use a gym, I'm like, why is this guy like this? Like I'm a curious guy. Like that's why like I'm always coming up with things in my head to try to figure out, oh, why did you do this? Because like I don't know, like I feel like a lot of people see things that may be perceived as crazy that somebody attempts to do or they do, and it could be crazy. But one of my first things is like what made this person like this? Like I'm a big documentary guy, so I look at criminal stuff, I look at life stuff. So if you're going looking at like a serial killer thing, I'm always interested like what made the serial killer like this? Like I doubt he was just born and he was just violent wanting to kill everybody. Like it had to be
Right.
something that just struck a nerve where he just flipped out. And that I don't know, like that just interests me a lot. I don't know about you, but that's
Yeah.
interests me a
No,
lot.
same. Like I think it's so good. It's like the just being curious about people, or curious about like why people do things the way they do it. Um, I think it's great. I think it's a great attitude. It's something I try to hold on to myself, because I feel like whenever I get stuck, or I'm kind of judgmental, or I close down, or I get cynical or whatever, I also notice that my curiosity is also down. And
Mm,
if I can just simply kind of reframe something to become more curious about it, generally I then become more open as well. My cynicism goes down. I don't think you could be cynical and curious at the same time,
mm.
you know?
I got a question for you because that's interesting. Because when the pandemic first started and everybody was in their house for the most part, you're in LA, right?
Yeah.
A little bit different in Florida. I'm not gonna lie. Actually,
Yeah.
absolutely nobody was in their house. Absolutely nobody.
Sure.
I
Oh,
felt like I was
yeah.
the only person in my house around that time.
Oh my God.
Like it was freaking March of 2020, and people, hey, you want to go out to the club? Like, no, I don't. It's actually like a
Right.
crazy thing going on right now. So nobody, but I feel like I was the only one. So staying in the house I learned something. I felt like I get a lot of because I am naturally a homebody person, but I do realize that just from going out places, seeing people, interacting with people, just looking at nature, I get a lot of ideas and creativity and juices flowing. And you just talking about like being cynical and the creativity being turned down or your curiosity being turned down. Was there a point at any time in this pandemic where you did feel like your creativity took a shot, or were you still always pumping
Mm.
up ideas, you think?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think my like creative energy, or whatever you want to call it, inspiration, like it definitely does this kind of ebbs and flows. But um, yeah, I don't know. Like for me, I think I never hit like a writer's block or anything like that. I generally don't have issues with like, oh, I can't think of anything, or I can't come up with ideas. But for me, I hit like an all-time stress high when the pandemic hit. Like I was already feeling pretty burnt out just from working really hard. Our show was greenlit in 2016, and by like 2018, 2019, I was like burnt. Just I'd been working 80, 90-hour work weeks. Oh my God, it's so unhealthy. And it just kind of caught up to me. I started to make some changes in my life to try to rebalance things and get healthier again. But then 2020 hit, and it was like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. And so like my stress hit an all-time high. And but what's weird is like my creativity or my output has always kind of it's always kind of remained the same, I think, in some ways, because it's like it's an outlet for me. I think sometimes like when my stress raises, I think my output raises, because it's like maybe I'm trying to work through something, or I'm just trying to like get stuff out. And I'm talking more like personal work, not work at like on big city greens or anything, but just like outside of work. During COVID, I started painting a lot. I did a lot of like abstract painting, which I'm still doing, and that's been really fun. But it's felt more like art therapy rather than like, oh, I'm gonna, I've got a business plan and I'm gonna come up with these, this theme of work. I'm going to do an art show and have an Instagram account that's synced up to it, and everyone's got a QR code tattooed on the back of their neck. I don't know, whatever, some crazy idea. It's more so, it's like, wow, I wanted to calm down. I wanted to have some kind of outlet that like de-stressed me, kind of got quiet, and I found it in abstract painting, which I always rolled my eyes at
It's
up until then.
no, it's that's crazy. I mean, that's crazy. You're about to be like the best animator and like the new like Pollock. Like that's kind of cool. It's, that's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. But
Well, as long as I don't turn into a raging alcoholic like he was.
yo, all of those people, it's crazy. Like I was just talking about this with somebody recently. Because like I said, I am at school like studying like psychology, sociology and stuff. And just learning about some of these people, they're absolutely insane. You look up anything about Sigmund Freud, that guy legitimately lunatic. Like his theories are already crazy. And then I remember being in class and somebody was like, yo, like, I think she asked teacher, like, yeah, you think like this guy is like where do you get his ideas from? She's like, oh, he was a big cokehead. And I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense now. Because he is absolutely insane. So
that
that is
that sounds typical. Sounds like someone with mother issues and phallic. I don't know, whatever. I don't
I
know
mean,
enough of Freud,
I
but
I'm just reading some of that stuff. I'm like, yo, he some interesting like who is his mother? Like he has some very
yeah,
interesting things going on for sure.
I
So,
know. For someone who wanted everyone else to deal with their mother issues, I'd like to ask him about his own mother. It's like, hey, man, those in glass houses, buddy.
that's
Uh,
hilarious. That is hilarious. He
well,
was
what
just
about Carl Jung? Because I feel like I relate a lot more to what little I know about his teachings and the whole idea of like, hey, the whole self is also includes the shadow,
mm,
right? And I related a lot to that, like, and still do, because I think I wonder if like I don't know, like true madness or any kind of like pick whatever kind of negative word you want to use for that. I wonder if it's like, is it from not fully realizing yourself? Like, I think there's a lot in our, I don't know, not to get too heady, but like a lot in our culture or a lot in just the way we're raised where it's like, hey, don't embrace the dark side of yourself. And in a way, I think that leads to a lot of like repression, suppression, and in a way, it also kind of gives the darkness more power than it should ever have. Whereas I think when someone's like, when I'm feeling healthy, I know it's when I'm like accepting all of myself, and that includes like the bad parts, the dark parts. Um, I don't know. Is that maybe I'm totally botching Carl Jung's work, by the way, but that was my interpretation anyway.
No, I was gonna say I feel like it goes back to a couple of things we talked about. One being the depression, how America is the third most depressed country in the world, and there's a reason for that. It's not like that's just a coincidence or anything, and it's a lot of reasons. And I think that one another thing we are talking about was the pandemic. It either like helped or hurt a lot of people because it kind of made people sit down in their house and they didn't have any distractions. They couldn't go out to party or go out to eat with friends. They kind of had to deal with them. And I realized that a lot of people struggle with being with themselves. A lot of people need to be around others, whether that's to distract them, to repress things. They need to be around others, but being around themselves, they get too deep in their thoughts, and those thoughts end up being dark. And like you said, we usually shy away from those dark thoughts because in Western society, it's not really, looked upon greatly. Definitely, like somebody, me being black, in the black community, it's not like a thing you talk about being depressed or things of that sort or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that I feel like we don't realize that whole self because one, we don't really like to spend that much time with ourselves. We like to distract ourselves being with other people. And then two, depending where you grew up, who you grew up with, that might not be just, looked upon as a good thing. I was reading this study. I had to do this project a couple months ago and I had to cite this ended up citing one of these articles that some lady wrote, I think like in the early 2000s in the Midwest in a black community where she went around to just talk about depression with them, and their responses were crazy. It was like one dude, I think she like she inferred that one person may be depressed. And she was like, "Girl, don't say that word." Like she cursed at her or something. Like she
Wow.
got
Yeah.
very
Don't
offended.
even bring that up.
Yeah, So one dude, he ended up having a heart attack, and she was telling him like, "Yo, you're stressed right now, and if you're stressed, that could lead to like your bad mental health could lead to bad physical health." And he was just like, "Don't like that hoopla, don't bring that over here or whatnot." So I just think that is you know, it's just depending where you grew up at, and the fact that we just don't like to spend time with ourselves. So yeah, I think realizing
Yeah.
your whole self, that's like almost like on some like becoming as one with yourself type of thing when you
Yeah.
realize like who you are.
Totally. Totally. And I I I think I understand what you're saying just because I can only relate to my own experience. And like, I grew up in a little farm town, and there's a lot of anything you talked about, like spiritual or like mental health. It was all kind of seen through the lens of the church,
Mhm.
which was a great way to be able to talk about feelings in certain ways. But there wasn't a lot of like, you know, I don't know. We just didn't know as much as we knew now. Also, that's the other thing, just time. We've all learned a lot more about like mental health and kind of what I don't know, mind, body, soul, all that kind of like,
Yeah.
what it means to be healthy. And for me, if I could share a personal story,
Yeah.
I over COVID, I hit this all-time just stress for myself, and I'd experienced this burnout just a couple years prior, so I didn't want to go down that road again. I knew how bad it could get. Like, oh my God, I had like just to that person that you mentioned about that who had a heart attack and
Mhm.
didn't really believe it was due to stress. Like, man, I think all it takes is like experiencing it firsthand. I'm surprised he maybe hasn't changed his viewpoint on it, but like for me, experiencing it firsthand made me realize like, oh, it's real. Like stress can have a super physical and mental and emotional toll on you. And so I went through a lot of health issues. I had like scalp issues and immune system problems and total fatigue and weight gain and that was just like the physical stuff. Um, so anyway, 2020 hit, and I was like, I don't want to go back to where I was, but I'm feeling super stressed. I got to try something else out, and so I started meditating. During this meditation class on Zoom, and we would meet twice a week, and it was really like introductory because I had never meditated or anything like that. And it kind of felt like going back to like preschool, and it was like learning about emotions. And it was like there was times where I felt like rolling my eyes or kind of like I'd kind of be embarrassed to even be in this class, but it was so helpful. And it was kind of, I think, just what I needed at the time to like, okay, I gotta, if I'm struggling so much, maybe it's because I don't have certain skills, that I could invest a little time and energy in and gain some skills and strength, and then not deal with the stress as much. And that's basically what happened, long story short. And I did that for like a year. Actually, I'm still doing it, but I did it for a year, and it kind of led me uh, to this other journey I've been on through the latter half of COVID, and it's been coming off my antidepressant. I've been
Mhm.
on this antidepressant for decades, actually. I was put on it when I was a kid, and I've always wanted to come off. I've tried unsuccessfully in the past, and now I'm like a year into slowly coming off of this thing, and I've done a lot of research. I'm working with doctors, and it's definitely like a safe and unsafe way of doing this, but yeah, it's all of this is to say, I think it's actually due to the like intense pressure that COVID and quarantine have been put on all of us. But my just specific journey was this one, and yeah, it's just interesting, when you're forced to kind of sit in a pressure cooker
Yeah.
by yourself. What are you going to do about it? And so it's interesting. I think I know the last couple of years have definitely changed me, but I don't think I'm alone. I think it's changed all of us in a lot of ways.
I wish I had a round of applause button for you. You know, getting better
Hey,
and
let's hit it
everything.
up with an emoji. Check it. Who says Zoom can't be fun?
I didn't even know you could do that. You just told me. I had no idea you could put
Hey,
emojis
listen,
on too.
stick with me, Eric. You'll learn a thing or two.
Hey, hey, you're teaching me something. I mean, because that's beautiful. I feel like meditation is a beautiful thing because one thing that it teaches you that I feel like is really important is breathing. Breathing, you can like manipulate your mind with just
Yeah.
weird breathing techniques that you would have never thought, you know? Like that's why I would
Yeah.
say, like if you're like having a panic attack, just try to breathe. Then you breathe out, you know, and it's just like and it's different breathing techniques, like because you breathe one way for it to feel if you're angry, but you'll breathe this if
Yes.
you're sad, you know, and it's just like it's
That's
crazy.
exactly the when I say meditating, the exercises I've been doing exactly that. It's just
Yeah.
these different breathing techniques kind of based on what you're feeling. And what I've been blown away. I didn't even realize that was a thing. And I'd spent the last 20 years, like if you have a panic attack, just here, take one of these. And I'd have like these benzos in my pocket. And I learned like they're dangerous and addictive and horrible. And my God, if you can solve it by breathing, come on, that's
It's
huge.
crazy. And I know somebody who recently just came off their antidepressants, and I seen how she was. She was like very like when you're coming off of it, it could tear you down. It could have you feeling crazy, feeling bad, and because I know her medicine specifically makes her eat, so it
Yeah.
changes her diet almost. When she's off of it, now her diet is kind of thrown off, and she doesn't know if she wants, you know. And it's just like it's a whole bunch of crazy
Yeah.
stuff. So I know how crazy that could be. So I'm glad to hear you're getting healthy. I know you
Thank
said
you,
that
man.
earlier. Yeah, of course. But before you even got into the story, I heard you were saying you're getting healthy. And I'm not gonna lie, the first thing my mind went to, I'm like, he's getting healthy now. Now he's going to be eating on the elliptical, you know, and instead of
Yeah,
going nuts.
that's right. Sorry, I can't do lunch. I got to do lunch at the gym on the elliptical and then vomit.
But no, seriously, like all jokes aside, I am happy to hear that you have taken this pandemic to, you know, try to better yourself, and it seems like it's working.
Thanks,
So,
man.
hey, congrats, man. I'm happy to hear that.
You know, it's funny because I always had this fear that, like, I was like, oh my God, because I knew I was dependent on these antidepressants. And there, even as a kid, I had this fear that, like, what if I was in a plane crash and I was stranded on a desert island and I had to survive? My biggest worry was like the antidepressant, even more than like food and water. I knew that like if I didn't have this thing, I'd just fall apart. And a lot of people will if they're like just stripped of their cold turkey off of whatever they're on. And but what's ironic is COVID kind of turned my life into a desert island in kind of the best of ways. It was like very secluded, got a little more quiet. And in a way, I'm like, man, I'm so lucky to be able to have the environment I have to to get healthy, because it's hard enough to do that, but it's really hard to do it under like worst conditions, and many people have worse conditions than I do. And so, yeah, I've been very lucky to have my kind of Swiss Family Robinson stranded desert island experience the last couple of years here.
Well, I'm glad you feel comfortable enough to share because I'm pretty sure somebody will watch this that may be going through a similar type of situation that you were in. That might be something that they need to hear. So I'm glad you were
Yeah,
shared.
yeah, totally. There's, like you said, third. If we're the third most depressed country in the world, and I haven't heard that statistic, but that I believe it.
Yeah.
Uh, I also wonder, there's a lot of people on antidepressants, and and no judgment, by the way. Everyone, totally individual choice, but I do know that, yeah, a lot of people are coming off of antidepressants for one reason or another, and it's really tricky. It's really
Yeah.
tricky, and it's kind of an unknown journey that there's a lot of resources online that are really helpful. If anyone's curious, I would recommend, let's see, survivingantidepressants.org is a good resource. Also, uh, Your Drug May Be Your Problem is a great book with some practical resources. Great resources. Anyway, I'm not pushing anything, but I'm just advocating that if anyone wants to do this, just do some research and make sure you're doing it very, very slowly and safely.
Of course. Last thing I want to say before we get to, because we haven't even talked about the show. We haven't talked about
Yeah, we
anything.
haven't even talked about what are we doing.
That's why great. That's why you're a great conversationalist. Like we haven't even really been talking about
Hey
anything.
man, this is great.
But before one thing I do want to say before I get to that is I think the most interesting thing I just thought about when I seen the statistic about us being the third most depressed country. When you think of America, you think of like, oh, it's the great country. We have money. It's a first world country. Da, 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 da. But you see the countries that are so much happier. Those would be the countries that would be considered the third world countries, the developing countries, the countries where it's like, oh, why would you want to live there? And it's like, dang, it's like they don't have a lot of money, but they're so happy. We have all the money, and we're depressed. Like, what does that mean? You know, that was like the most mind
What
blowing
does
thing.
that mean?
You know,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It really puts things into perspective and makes you I think it should humble us, even the term first world country, it's like, well, if you're maybe in wealth, but what
yeah.
about in health, baby? Yeah,
Most important, hey, wealth cannot buy health, so that's a very important
that
thing.
is very true. That is very true.
Well, let me tell you how I found you. Let me tell you how I
Yeah,
discovered who you are. So, let's see. Probably, I don't know, had to have been some years ago. I try to stay tapped into all the cool cartoons that's coming out, just cool shows in general. So, including
yeah.
cartoons. So, I seen Big City Greens. Whenever, whatever year I seen it was probably when it first came out. So, was that 2016?
It premiered in 2018.
2018. So 2018.
Yep.
So 2018, that was probably the first year I seen it. And I was just like, yo, not only is this like, so I feel like when you speak about like a children's cartoon, I would think about SpongeBob. SpongeBob, I feel like of this generation is like a cultural icon type of thing.
Oh my God.
And I
Yeah.
think what makes it so great is that yes, it's a children's cartoon, but it doesn't feel like it's tailored to that specific audience because not only will the children laugh at it, parents laugh at it, teenagers laugh at it, old people, whatever, any type
Totally.
of white, black, girl, man, whatever, anybody
Yeah.
can laugh at SpongeBob. And that was the similar feeling I got to your show. And I was like, in
Hmm.
Big City Greens, not only can I could see a small child laugh at it, I could see somebody my age laughing at it. I could see somebody older, way older than me laughing at it, just because it's just a show that I feel like it's charismatic. I feel like charisma can entertain all. Anybody that's just super charismatic can make anybody laugh. And I just feel like the show is just a genuinely good show, and I feel like it breaks boundaries in the sense of like it's not just for kids. Anybody could find this show entertaining. So I just wanted to interview you, and was surprised you even responded. I was like, oh, this guy's got to be super busy making all these shows. The fact you responded, thank you for that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to let you know that you have a very special show, in my opinion.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, that means a lot, and it'd be foolish of me to stand here and take all that credit because obviously I made the show with my brother and I run it with them, and then we work with this amazing crew, and it's a crew that we're proud to say we've hired, but we've hired under the guise of like, hey, we really like how you think,
Yeah.
and oh, like I think we think the similar things are funny. You want to work together? And we've amassed this crew that it's really cool to see a bunch of creative people who come from different walks of life and everything, but we're all pointing towards the same thing. We're all trying to kind of make this show the best it can be, and we all agree, like the stuff you're saying, we that's for one, those are the shows we love, like SpongeBob, fantastic, Simpsons, King of the Hill, like he's a wonderful, like character driven sitcom shows that everyone can get behind. It's just like a really cool type of TV show. There's all different types of TV shows, but I really like that type that like everyone can kind of gravitate towards. You can watch it with your parents, your grandma, and like connect with them because you're both giggling at this silly show. So that's great, man. I'm glad to hear that resonated with you. And hey, to be mentioned in the same breath as SpongeBob, we'll take it. That's awesome.
It's of that elk, and I feel like it would even be okay. So tell me how you feel about this because I was talking about somebody with this recently. Um, I feel like in the eras of the SpongeBob's and the cartoons of, even before that, like Cat Dog and stuff like that, those type of cartoons,
Cat dog, yeah.
classic stuff. With that type of era,
Yeah.
it felt like there were more. children watching cartoons. I could be very wrong. Have seen the stats on this. Cannot, don't quote me on this. But I just assume this is what kids are doing now. Kids, when they're very young, like kindergarten level, they're watching cartoons probably up to like the fourth grade once their parents buy them like a tablet or a phone or the computer. And now I feel like they have replaced cartoons. Now they're watching TikTok, or now they're watching their favorite YouTuber, or now they're watching their favorite whatever social media influencer now. And I feel like that starts at a very young age, and now they're not as tuned into the cartoons. I feel like you would know that better than me because you deal with children's cartoons. Do you think that's a reality or not as much?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, you go back just a couple decades or so, and the ratings for linear, they call it linear TV, like
Mhm.
traditional TV. The ratings were so much higher back then, and it's also because there was less content. It makes sense that there's just so much more attention for eyeballs. You hear everyone say that. Yeah, exactly. You said YouTube, TikTok, like that alone has shattered everything. But then throw in just like social media, video games, and now there's like kind of the streaming versus linear as well. And so everyone's fighting over like smaller slices of the pie. But I don't know, man. I think back like when I was in art school, I had this great teacher named Dave Chow, who he would always talk about how the world's going to change and the business is going to change and this is going to change and that's going to change and the technology you're using is going to change. But he was always like, just take a deep breath and know that people always want good stories. That's it, And I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's like there's a lot of like flash in the pan, big showy things that can grab all of our attention online. You see it happen every day. Like things go viral, it grabs everyone's attention, but it can't grab it for very long. It's kind of that like inch wide, or what is it? Mile wide, inch deep,
Mhm.
and then you
Well,
see
let me say something
people,
about that. I read a good book.
yeah.
Read a good book about that called the McDonaldization of society. It's talking about just how everything like
Uh,
super fast food or whatnot, and kind of like that. And if anybody wants
right.
to read that, interesting book. Keep going. I'm sorry, Jay.
Interesting. Okay, I haven't read that. Maybe I'll check it out. Yeah, and so I think like, or you can go, you see a lot of like niche TV shows. That's the cool thing about what's currently happening too. You get these shows that never would have been made before, and they're a little bit more of an inch wide, mile deep as far as who they're speaking to, and so we're kind of somewhere in the middle because we're on Disney Channel. That's a very like expansive audience, but whenever you try to cater to a lot of people, you also run the risk of just kind of watering down whatever you're trying to say, and everyone goes, yeah, that's something, you know. And so yeah, we try to strike a balance of just keeping the show accessible to anyone who is kind of scouring through all of the media choices they have at their disposal. Hey, you can come watch Big City Greens. You can jump in at any episode. You can enjoy it. It's 11 minutes. We're not even going to ask you for a full half hour. And if you enjoy it, great. Come on back for more. And but while we've got you, we want to try to either tell the funniest stories we can or say something kind of interesting or maybe just look at something from a different angle. In the writers room we're always talking about interesting kind of sociology type themes and ideas because that's really interesting, and cartoons are such a great vehicle to kind of explore interesting themes and the way people act and interact with each other. I guess TV in large does that, but that's always what we're trying to kind of play in. But yeah, to go back to your question, like there is a ton of competition. um that's why I'm so thankful and also kind of shocked that Big City Greens is doing so well. But I think it really speaks to that whole like personal is universal and universal is personal. Like we always have just tried to make something that we as a crew are laughing at and feeling for and like connecting with, and then you put it out and you just hope someone else feels the same way. And I don't think there's any more strategy to it than that. And I think once there is, I think things get muddy and watered down. So we're very lucky to like have this little connection to our audience, and people that like the show. They seem to kind of walk away with it the same takeaway you have, where it's like, this is kind of interesting, and it's not what I expected, or I didn't think the show would go there, or we hear from a lot of parents who are just like, oh, this is a show I can actually watch with my kids and not want to like scratch my eyes out, which I take as a high compliment.
Well, no, I think you should, because I think it's interesting that you say that, like, it shouldn't be too much strategy. When you put too much, you might just go overboard or whatever. That's like with SpongeBob. Not to keep going back to that, but I just feel like that is like this culture. I mean, this generation's like, like a Tom and Jerry or whatever, like go Looney Tune show you want to put up there or whatnot.
Yeah.
Because that was 20 years ago. They're making these episodes that are memes now. It's not like they were in the writers' rooms like, oh, it's gonna be the
Let's
funniest
make a
meme.
meme. Yeah.
It wasn't even around. So the fact that a 20-year-old show has memes that are still relevant today, that people are literally every year there's a new SpongeBob meme. It's like they're
Yeah.
finding an
I know.
episode every year. So I feel
Yeah.
like with your show, that might be a thing. It might be a thing 20 years from now that we have no idea. It might be the new meme, whatever that
That
means.
is trippy to think about. Like, to think, we're at the end of the day, we're making kids media, which means those kids grow up one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a really just surreal thought. So,
Yeah.
yeah, 20 years from now, I might be at like some mall kiosk, like doing Cricket's voice, like, hey, remember Cricket Green? Pay $10 and I'll leave you a voicemail, or whatever the metaverse equivalent will be of a voicemail. Yeah.
That's funny. It's like even going back to like you talking about how ratings were higher. I think about like shows and stuff that I was into when I was a kid. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a huge wrestling fan. I don't think
Mm.
kids watch wrestling anymore at all.
Yeah, right.
I don't think kids could tell you their favorite wrestler right now. Like a 8-year-old, you go to like your average 8-year-old in the street. I don't think he'd be like, what are you talking about? He would have
Yeah.
no idea what that is.
And then he would just do a mean Fortnite dance and
Exactly.
disappear.
He would
Yeah.
tell you his favorite Fortnite dance before his
Yeah.
favorite wrestler at this point.
Actually, he would probably know any wrestlers who may have like a Fortnite skin in the game, but
Or
they wouldn't know that was a wrestler or something. I don't know.
the only way you probably know him is like the wrestler's like a big Twitch streamer as well, and he's like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's true.
he wrestles? I thought he was just a Twitch streamer.
Yeah, that is a weird. I know, because I'm 33. I'm
Mhm.
turning 34 soon, and I think part of that too is like, I don't know how old you are, but I think part of that is just like age,
Yeah.
and just finally recognizing that it's like, oh, the things that I liked and my experiences as a kid are now, enough time has passed that they are now radically different from what like kids are experiencing now. And I always think like, oh God, what's it feel like when you're in your like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s? Like, how is every 80-year-old not just screaming all the time, going, everything's changed. Nothing is the same from when I was a young boy. I
And
guess they did. I guess old people do kind of
yeah, I
bring
guess
it
like
up a lot. Yeah.
the classic Simpsons meme where it's like old man screams at the cloud type of
Yeah,
thing.
for
So
real.
there's that. But no, I'm 23, so even
23.
like
Okay.
going back to the wrestling thing. When I was young, wrestling. I mean, when you were young, wrestling was way popular. It was even more popular because that was the
Yeah.
90s.
Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
was at its peak almost at that time, where they were getting, like you said, the ratings they were getting back then
Oh my
would be
God.
unheard of in
Yeah.
today's society. So
Yeah.
that is very, very, very interesting. But I feel like at the end of the day, good content, good art, it stands the test of time. And whether if, like you said, your show's doing great, but even if it wasn't doing great, somebody will like 10 years from now, people like, oh, like one of my favorite shows of all time that is the epitome of, oh, nobody really cared about the show when it was on air, but after it was off air, it was the biggest show. Chris Rock show, everybody hates Chris.
Yeah.
I remember when that show was on air, never heard a soul talk about that show. After it was canceled and I was syndicated, I could not stop seeing that show. Everybody knows that show. And I feel like that just shows that good art is going to get the recognition at the end of the day someday. And I'm glad that Big City Green is getting his flowers while it's still on air, because man, it's chef's kiss, man. It's great.
Oh, well, thanks. We lucked out, and it's really interesting. I think part of that's just kind of a cool thing about mass media or entertainment for such a large group of people is like, even the failures, like when a movie flops at the box office, like still there might have been a million people who saw it, like even though it was a flop, and it might have really affected those million people, and I don't know, it might come back, or but like we're really lucky to kind of find our audience while we're still on the air, and to be able to kind of ride that success. It's been really cool because when we first premiered, we were not uh, anything really special. It was like the show came out. Creatively, we were still trying to find our footing, just with the show, and it took a little bit, but I'm also really lucky that we were able to kind of take that time. Sometimes shows, especially now in this age of streaming, you got to come out and you got to hit with your audience right out of the gate. And not everything does that, actually, including SpongeBob. SpongeBob was not a hit right
Really?
out of the gate. It took a little minute. Yeah, it took like I think it was like their third season or so. Things really started to pick up, and then they got their movie, and then it was like, oh, they're a bona fide hit. But yeah, it's like a lot of times these really popular things or things that connect with people. It's interesting. I think they oftentimes they not need a little incubation period or percolating, for a I don't know, word to spread, and you get your early adapters, and then they kind of tell their friends, and that takes some time.
I feel like you guys, you guys like have a lot of like references. It's almost like Easter eggs. Like if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. Like I remember one episode, it was the one where I think Cricket wanted to see like a rated R movie, basically, or like in that episode, and how it was
Yeah,
like like the movie posters, like when you're at the movie theater, just like the posters, like they're on the. I think I seen like an allude to like Big Mama's house on one of them or whatever, and I just found
yeah,
that super funny. I was like, I don't even know if anybody's
yeah.
seen
I forget. It was like what did we name it? It's like Large Mama or something. I don't know. Some like very low hanging fruit parody. Yeah.
it.
Like
It's just
Henry Cauldron and the silly little parodies and stuff. Yeah.
it'd be
My
stuff
big
like
fat Greek funeral or something.
I didn't even catch that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Or my big fat funeral. Yeah. Something like that.
When I see stuff like that, it's like, oh, you have to be a certain age to probably even catch some of this stuff. And I think about like just certain episodes of TV of children's shows where I was like, oh, this was a risky joke maybe to make on a kids show. Like I always think about the episode of SpongeBob where they're cursing or they're bleeping out the curse words.
Oh, it's a great
Like
episode. Yeah.
it's like I like how do you think that happens? Like do you think just the network trusted them so much to do that? Because I feel like I've never seen anything like that on a children's TV show where they're basically cursing, but they're bleeping out. Like how I don't know. Like, do you think that that could happen in this era, or is that just the once in a blue moon type of thing? Like how did that? How do you think
Yeah.
something
Right.
like that happens?
Yeah. I think it's tricky. Like, I think, I mean, I don't know exactly how that
Yeah, of course.
episode came to be or anything, but I would imagine it was some kind of conversation between the creative leads on the show and then the network. The network is always in a tricky place because they want to have those episodes that pop and really make an impact, but they don't want to shake things up so much that they're getting letters from angry parents, and so it's like a fine line. And I think you know I think I think if you can build up some trust and a decent track record to say, hey, we took a risk here, and remember how that paid off. We took a risk here, and that paid off. Here's another risk. Can we go for it, and hopefully it'll pay off. And so I think there's like kind of a working relationship that has to happen between the creative people making the crazy ideas, and then the people paying for it and essentially taking on the risk. And but like look at our show, and we creatively we're able to do a lot of stuff now that early on we had to fight for, just even jokes and certain things that maybe felt maybe a little different for the channel.
Yeah.
But once they saw that it was working and the audience really likes it, to their credit, they were like, great, do more of that. So yeah, I think like that specific SpongeBob thing, I think like totally. I think we'll continue to see weird stuff. I hope we continue to do weird stuff that like surprises people and kind of skates that edge of like, oh, can they do that? That's really funny, but it's not too far that it feels like you're breaking the brand, or that
Yeah.
you're, you know, uh, putting kids in a weird position or something. It's like, yeah, look at what we showed kids. It's like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. That was irresponsible.
It's just
The
down in
children are crying.
Chris is down in like Bud Light or something. I was like, oh, what's going
Look what
on?
we got through the censors. Yeah, it's like I never want to do anything like that. Where it's like, I like, I feel like whatever you're doing, right now, like I'm working in kids media,
Yeah,
kids entertainment. And yes, we want to make it broad and we want adults to enjoy it and everything. But I would also like, I think there's I never want to like fight what I'm doing. Like for instance, I would never want to like try to turn Big City Greens into like a Fox,
yeah,
adult animated sitcom, because it's like, well, it's just not that, and it's not on the same network. And I see sometimes that happen, on different shows or different networks. It's like people kind of like fighting the brand or fighting the even maybe the intended audience and stuff. And I think like accepting it fully is maybe one of the reasons we've been able to like broaden our audience. It's because we really do want to make great entertainment for kids. That's our first goal. And but we want to entertain ourselves, and that usually results in like jokes being in that like parents can enjoy. And but yeah, I never want to like fight uh like the aspect of the job that is kids entertainment.
well, one of my favorite Disney Channel shows of recent memory kind of told the line with that. And coincidentally or no coincidence, you worked on the show. Gravity Falls. I know you did the animation for that. If I'm not, you worked on the animation side of that. That
Yeah, I
show,
was a board artist.
you're the board artist. So that show, I felt like had so much just good. It was funny. It told the line with the like, oh, they're saying this audition. It's funny. Like it's still good. And that show is so like that was just beautiful to me. And I honestly haven't felt like that since. And then I seen Big City Greens, and I was like, this is giving me that Gravity Falls feel where I'm like, this is just good TV on Disney Channel. And I think that you are doing a beautiful job because like I really held that show like high like
Oh man, it's a great show.
before Big City Greens. I tell people like, man, like Disney Channel, their best show by far in recent time was Gravity Falls. And I don't know if they could top it. And then you came with this, I'm like, oh, they might have actually topped it with that. So it was
Hey.
great.
Well, I Gravity Falls is fantastic, and I learned a ton working on that show. I was one of many board artists,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I think. But what was interesting, I remember working on that show, and even before it premiered, or I came on right when it was premiering. I joined the crew like a year and a half into production or something, and but I remember there was this buzz on the crew and a buzz around the studio. And because it was like, wow, everyone recognized, like, this is really funny. This is really cool. And, but every once in a while, I would hear a comment from someone at the studio or even, and then once it premiered, certain audience members would say this and be like, I can't believe this is on Disney Channel. And I always disagreed. I always thought like, well, this feels very Disney to me. It feels like there's a family at the core of it. There's always heart at like Hirsch would never sacrifice like the heart of the characters for a cheap joke or anything like that. The jokes were always on top of like a really solid, really sitcom
Yeah.
family foundation. And to me, I was like, oh, that totally feels like Disney. And sure, maybe the dressing is kind of new and exciting, kind of funny, but yeah, it was just such a great show. I think because it balanced both those things really well. And I think like, you know, these other shows we mentioned, like SpongeBob and these shows, everyone's a fan of like classic comedy and just trying to write really solid um well crafted jokes. And I think if you do that well, it like hits hard and people remember those jokes. And so we're just trying to stand on the shoulders of giants and make funny stuff.
Hey, I think you're achieving at that. And I do have two more things I need to ask you because I feel like
Yeah.
these things are very interesting. It's two things that we actually alluded to. The first one being the music side. I
Yeah.
realized that it's some very good music in Big City
Oh
Dream.
my God.
Very
Yeah.
familiar music. I was looking at episode yesterday, and it's the episode where Cricket is like, they're doing the trivia night. It's a trivia night episode,
Yeah.
and in his brain, and he's walking by his, I think one of like his like brain cells or whatever, and it's the one where like the fish is singing. I think it's like the Little Richard, the tutti frutti,
Oh yeah.
woo, and he
Barracuda. Yeah.
and I thought that was just a nice little touch right there. And
Oh
I
man.
think that that's another layer to the show that makes it good. I feel like what makes a movie, everybody, everybody talks like film enthusiasts talks about like soundtracks of movies and things like that. And I feel like that's just important for a show. The show has a good soundtrack to it. It's like, this ups it even more to me. So I'm assuming that's
Yeah.
something that's like a conscious effort to make the music good.
Oh man, totally. And I would be there's a few things I want to say about the music in the show, but the main credit goes to our composer, Joachim Horsley,
Okay.
which is a real name. And he's a fantastic um, composer, super, I mean, incredible music genius. But I think what makes him so damn good at his job is he's also a great storyteller. He's really funny by, just, and he gets it. Like he gets the show and he gets what we're trying to do. And he always like is there to support and elevate the moments we're trying to make. And then on the flip side, there's also we have a lot of creative musical folks on the crew. Like for instance, both my brother Shane and I play music, and we wrote the end credit song. And there's like a song coming up in season 3 that I wrote with one of the writers who actually he doesn't play any instruments, but he is just kind of he likes writing lyrics and songs, and he sang the Barracuda song.
Really?
He wrote it and then did the vocals for it. That's one of our staff writers, Carson Montgomery, who's this hilarious guy from Alabama and a delightful writer who's been with us since day one. And then some of the board artists will sometimes they'll take a song, maybe they'll do kind of a parody of a song, but they're adding a lot a lot originality themselves, and then that like rough demo will be sent to our composer. So there's a lot of like music collaboration, but yeah, a huge part of it is Yohim, and it really does that adds a whole like familiarity to the show, and like kind of like a nice blanket to wrap the show in, like the music. And I would also argue like the voices as well. There's like we have our core cast, and then we also use our core cast for a lot of like the side characters, and like Shane does a lot of like side characters and stuff. And I think that also like you start to hear the same voices in the show, and then you've got this great music, and I think that all kind of like blends together to create this like really cohesive sound to the show, in addition to like the story and the visuals. And that's something I didn't really realize was so important to like a TV series until we really got into it. It's like, wow, the sound and the music and the sound design, the voices, and how that all works together is just as important as the visuals, and also can like help save you in certain ways. If there's some bad filmmaking or a joke that didn't quite land or something, audio and music and sound can help save certain moments, and really just make everything more effective.
It almost makes you get like lost in the moment almost. So like you said, if it is bad,
Yeah.
you don't even realize it because you're just in the moment
Yeah.
doing the sounds. So
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like filmmaking is like you have like 10 different tools or 20 different tools at your disposal at any given time. And so if you kind of screw up in one area, if your other tools are good enough, it might account for like the thing that was lacking. And by the way, some of it's just like budgetary
mm,
restrictions, like, oh, I wish we could have done this. Well, you didn't have enough time, but maybe you can make up for it over here and smooth out that moment so that it's still an effective moment, even though you weren't able to get it all to a level that you really really wanted.
wait, man, the way I want to close this out because I was thinking about this, just looking at the show, and out of 300 interviews, I think you're the first like animator that I've ever interviewed. So
Hey,
never
look at
got to talk
that.
to anybody about this. So you
First
specifically,
of many, first of
first of
many, Eric.
many, first of many for sure. And you specifically working on a lot of children's cartoons. I was interested in what were your thoughts on kind of like just the Adult Swim era where they had their cartoons going, the more I guess adult centric themes or Comedy Central stuff like the South Park and stuff like. Were you
Oh
ever a
yeah.
fan of those? And two-part question: could you ever see yourself working on a more adult centric cartoon show?
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally a fan. I love South Park. Have always loved South Park from when it first came out, and it was just that like tee you shouldn't be watching this type show. And it was just kind of like farts and poop and
Yeah,
swearing and stuff. And then I watched that show evolve to this like really interesting social commentary um, type show. And then like Family Guy, I loved those early seasons, and then Rick and Morty, loved those early seasons of Rick and Morty, and then even recently Smiling Friends is hilarious and weird and just like
I was hoping you seen that show.
yeah.
I seen that. Hey, what a what a weird
Oh, it's
show.
great.
It's
It's so
crazy.
weird.
So weird.
Yeah. And I think it's really fun. Like I think Smiling Friends is really interesting because like uh well with all these shows, I think the challenge would be like you have I talked about like the tools in your toolbox or whatever for filmmaking. Well, if you're on like an adult network, you now have all the tools. Like you can do whatever you want. And I think that actually makes things harder in some ways because there are no restrictions.
Yeah.
And and then also you have an audience that like we've all seen the shock humor before. We at this point, like everyone was raised on the internet. It was like there it's hard to shock people. And I think that's what's interesting about Smiling Friends is like yeah, there's like some shocking, gross out stuff and everything, but more so it just feels weird and
Yeah.
kind of interesting and kind of different. And that still feels like you're using you're taking advantage of being on an adult network because I don't think that would fly on like a younger network and younger networks need to do certain things.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I I'm totally interested in that area, and I think but I think it would be tricky because um, restrictions. I think breed a lot of creativity. Like when you can't do certain things, it forces you to like figure out what you can do with the resources you have left. But if you can do anything, and especially if you have a huge budget, it's like I think that could be a blessing and a curse. But yeah, definitely an area that I would love to explore.
Sounds like you and your brother are going to be like just the best animators, animation creators.
Yes, yes, we shall conquer.
So you become the dictators of animators.
Right, that's right.
That is absolutely.
Things are about to change.
Well, hey man, I don't want to keep you for too long. If there's anything else you have to say for anybody watching, just please let it be known.
Let me see here. I would say the only thing I have to plug is Big City Greens. If you haven't seen Big City Greens and if you've made it this far in the interview, I'm shocked because it's dedication to something you have no knowledge of. So good on you. But check it out. I think you might like it if you haven't seen it. If you've got kids, maybe they know about it already. You could watch it together. If you don't have kids, it's okay. You can still watch it. I'm not going to tell anyone. No one's going to make fun of you if you watch a Disney Channel show. No one needs to know. Okay. You don't need to tweet about it. Just watch it, enjoy it, and hopefully come back for more.
Well, hey, I appreciate everybody watching. Please go watch Big City Greens. Like he said, it also gets my cosign. If that means anything, go watch it. It's an absolutely hilarious show. Until next time. Hey, I'm going to throw this out there because this would be hilarious. Couple seasons down the road, because this is gonna go on forever. This is one of those shows that
That's right.
it's going on until you don't want it to go on anymore.
25 seasons when I'm an old husk of a man.
Hey, just to make me laugh, you gotta have somebody with one of these bonnets on. You gotta throw a bonnet on one of the characters just to make me just laugh, just on one of the characters.
I've got good news for you, man. Remy in an upcoming episode is wearing a bonnet, so you are covered. And shout out to one of our board artists turned directors, Kiana Consmith, who put that on Remy and had to explain it to all of us. White people.
What is this headpiece he has on?
But it's delightful, and no, I you'll check out for Remy's bonnet. It's coming up.
I will. For everybody watching, until next time, I say what I mean what I say. Haters gonna hate, players gonna play. You guys, holla at your boy.